It began with a question no one dared to ask publicly, a thought lingering in the minds of palace watchers, journalists, and even the closest confidants of the royal family. Was Prince William's health really as robust as the world believed? For decades, the public has seen him as the picture of vitality, the young Prince of Wales with an impeccable record of duty, charity work, and royal appearances. He jogs in the crisp morning air, engages in military exercises with the precision of a trained officer, and greets thousands of well-wishers at events with a perfectly rehearsed smile. But behind the polished veneer, whispers had begun to circulate in hushed corridors, in the quiet of Kensington Palace hallways, and within the confidential rooms where doctors and advisors convene. There were signs, subtle, almost imperceptible to the untrained eye, yet glaring to those who knew where to look. The prince, it seemed, was hiding something, or perhaps the family was trying to shield him, and the public, from the full truth. It's a question that would soon escalate, a story that would demand attention not only because it involves one of the most prominent heirs in the world, but because the implications reach far beyond the palace walls. When the Prince of Wales made his latest confirmation, it wasn't just a routine statement. It was an admission that confirmed what insiders had feared all along, and it sent shockwaves across the monarchy and media alike. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. The story of Prince William's health isn't merely a medical chronicle. It's a tale that intertwines duty, secrecy, familial tension, and the immense pressure of living under constant public scrutiny. Imagine, for a moment, the weight of expectation that rests on his shoulders. From childhood, he was groomed to assume a role that demands perfection, composure, and unwavering strength. Every action is scrutinized, every misstep magnified. The world watches, the media speculates, and the family silently observes, often struggling to balance love, concern, and the institution's image. Now, as revelations emerge, the question becomes not just what is happening to Prince William, but how this truth will ripple through the royal hierarchy, the family dynamics, and the public perception of the monarchy. The tension is palpable. Every detail matters. Every report, every hint, every insider revelation begins to feel like a piece of a larger puzzle, a puzzle that, until now, has been hidden behind thick palace walls and careful PR management. It started with small things. Observant aides noticed subtle changes during official engagements, moments of fatigue where none should exist, brief pauses in conversation, the occasional wince when moving. Medical appointments, long kept confidential, were rumored to be more frequent, more urgent. Conversations that would normally be casual, in which William discussed sports, children, or the day's events, suddenly carried an undertone of caution, a hesitance that suggested deeper concerns. The staff whispered about canceled trips, replaced public appearances, and meetings that stretched far longer than usual, accompanied by what some described as intense, almost protective secrecy. Could this be stress, overwork, or something far more serious? For the public, these signs were invisible, cloaked by carefully curated appearances and the enduring perception of royal invincibility. For the family and close advisors, the story was far more concerning. Prince Charles, ever vigilant about his eldest son's well-being, reportedly demanded private briefings, speaking directly to medical professionals and conferring with the closest aides to ensure that nothing would disrupt the monarchy's delicate balance. Kate Middleton, known for her steadfast composure and emotional intelligence, became a quiet anchor, supporting her husband while navigating the pressures of public life. Behind closed doors, conversations were tense, and decisions carried weight beyond the ordinary scope of a family discussion. Every choice could influence succession planning, public perception, and the personal health of Prince William. Meanwhile, media speculation had already begun to swirl. Social media analysts dissected every photograph, every video clip, every public statement. Headlines began to hint at possible concerns, ranging from minor health issues to more serious conditions, though none had yet been confirmed. Rumors, of course, flourished, as they always do in the digital age. But what distinguishes this story from ordinary speculation is the recent confirmation from the Prince of Wales himself. The public, the media, and even palace insiders were left stunned. In one measured statement, carefully released through the appropriate channels, Charles confirmed concerns that had long been whispered. Prince William's health had reached a point that demanded serious attention, a revelation that shook the carefully maintained image of royal invincibility. For some, this news elicited shock; for others, concern; and for a few insiders, grim validation of fears long held. What does this mean for the monarchy? For the family? For the public perception of the heir to the throne? These questions are not hypothetical. They are immediate, pressing, and unavoidable. Every royal engagement from this moment forward carries a new layer of significance. Every appearance, every smile, every gesture is now scrutinized not only for what it communicates about duty, but what it might reveal about health. And the personal toll cannot be overstated. Prince William, whose life has been dictated by expectations and obligations, is now faced with a challenge that transcends public image. The stark reality of vulnerability, the confrontation with a condition that threatens not only his well-being but the careful orchestration of life he has meticulously navigated. Even now, the world only sees fragments. The palace releases statements with deliberate ambiguity, medical details are scarce, and insiders speak in cautious, cryptic language. Yet the pieces begin to fall into place. The missed engagements, the carefully orchestrated appearances, the private medical visits, and the confirmed acknowledgement by Prince Charles form a narrative that is as compelling as it is concerning. How did we get here? What were the warning signs? How much did the family know, and for how long? Every answer leads to more questions. Every revelation hints at secrets that may never fully see the light of day. And the impact is not confined to the palace alone. Public opinion, social media speculation, and global attention magnify every detail. Supporters express concern and empathy. Critics question transparency and decision-making. Meanwhile, historians and royal commentators are left piecing together the story, weighing the implications for succession and the long-term health of one of the most visible heirs in history. In this tangled web of secrecy, duty, and public fascination, one truth stands out. The confirmation by Prince Charles has changed everything. It has confirmed fears, validated rumors, and set the stage for developments that no one could have fully anticipated. But what came next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. A revelation, concealed until the last moment, emerged from a source few expected. It was not a statement, a press release, or even an official briefing. It was a subtle leak, a carefully timed disclosure that hinted at a worsening situation, one that threatens to redefine not only Prince William's daily life, but the very fabric of the monarchy as the world knows it. The prince's condition, the inner workings of the palace, the reaction of family members, and the ensuing media storm would soon converge, creating a narrative of tension, uncertainty, and emotion unlike any seen before. The stage is now set. The players are in position. And the story that unfolds will take us deep into the private and public world of Prince William, a world where appearances can be deceiving, where secrecy reigns, and where one revelation can shift the entire narrative. In the following chapters, we will explore the earliest signs, the insider knowledge, the escalating tension, the medical updates, and the personal and familial consequences that ripple outward from this shocking confirmation. Each chapter will reveal more than the last, building a story of drama, secrecy, emotion, and suspense. But the first question you must ask yourself is simple. How much do you really know about the Prince of Wales, and how much has been hidden in plain sight? And just when you think you have a handle on the situation, the truth takes a turn that no one expected, leaving the palace, the public, and the world waiting with bated breath for what comes next. Have you ever noticed how the smallest things often reveal the biggest secrets? How a subtle pause, a fleeting grimace, or a momentary lapse can hint at a reality far more serious than anyone imagines. That's exactly where Prince William's story begins, not with a public announcement, not with flashing cameras, but in the quiet, almost imperceptible signs that something was amiss. The world saw a composed heir, a figure who seemed untouchable, whose every public appearance radiated confidence and vigor. But behind the carefully choreographed movements, in the private corners of palace corridors, whispers of concern had already begun to circulate. It started innocuously. A missed handshake here, a slightly slower pace during ceremonial events there. Observers at royal functions might have shrugged, thinking he was simply tired or adjusting to a grueling schedule. But aides and longtime palace staff began to notice a pattern, small deviations from the expected norm that, when strung together, painted a far more concerning picture. There were times when Prince William would hesitate mid-conversation, seemingly caught between thought and action. His posture, always impeccable during official engagements, occasionally betrayed a flicker of fatigue or discomfort. These details were invisible to casual onlookers, but for insiders trained to observe the nuances of royal behavior, they were red flags. Consider the demands of his role. As the heir to the throne, Prince William carries the weight of expectation on multiple fronts. Every engagement requires not just physical presence, but emotional stamina, mental sharpness, and the ability to project calm and authority. To the public, these duties are ceremonial, routine even. But to those who serve beside him, each engagement is a test of endurance, both physically and psychologically. Even minor health concerns can have a disproportionate impact, forcing adjustments behind the scenes, rescheduling, or subtle support from aides that the public will never see. One of the earliest hints of trouble came during a routine charity engagement in central London. On paper, it was a standard event. A ribbon cutting, some brief speeches, a series of handshakes and photo opportunities. But staff noticed William lingering longer than usual, gripping his cane, a detail that would not escape those trained to see these nuances. Reports suggest that he asked for the schedule to be slightly altered to accommodate what was described as fatigue and discomfort. To outsiders, this may have seemed like a minor inconvenience. To palace insiders, it was the first public crack in a facade that had always seemed flawless. Even more telling were the private consultations that followed. Sources close to the family indicate that Prince William had begun a series of confidential medical assessments, visits to specialists, and discreet diagnostic tests. These appointments were shielded from the press, of course, and the palace went to great lengths to ensure that no leaks occurred. Yet, leaks did happen. In the shadowed corners of social media and palace rumor mills, fragments of information began to surface. Each piece hinted at concerns that had been previously dismissed, misattributed, or ignored. The question on everyone's mind became unavoidable. Could the heir to the throne be quietly battling a serious health issue that no one knew how to address publicly? The emotional stakes for the family were immense. Prince Charles, always meticulous in his oversight of his son's duties, reportedly grew increasingly concerned. Meetings with palace doctors and advisors became more frequent, conversations grew tense, and the usually composed atmosphere of Kensington Palace shifted into one of quiet urgency. Kate Middleton, known for her poise and dedication, became a stabilizing presence, balancing support for her husband with the demands of public life and the needs of their children. Staff members, many of whom had served the family for decades, described a palpable sense of worry, the kind that lingers in quiet hallways and whispered exchanges. What makes this story more complicated is the pressure of visibility. Prince William's life is constantly documented by paparazzi, official photographers, and ever-watchful observers at events. Every gesture, every expression, every interaction can be dissected within minutes of happening. A simple cough or a momentary pause becomes fodder for speculation, which can spiral uncontrollably on social media. The family's desire to maintain privacy while navigating these pressures only amplified the tension. Decisions were made cautiously. Some appearances were postponed, certain engagements modified, all while maintaining the image of a strong, capable heir. Despite these efforts, rumors began to circulate among royal correspondents. A few noticed inconsistencies. William's sometimes strained smile, his hands trembling slightly during public addresses, moments when he seemed distracted or absent. These weren't blatant signs of illness, certainly not the kind that could be immediately verified, but patterns began to emerge. Patterns that, in hindsight, seemed impossible to ignore. And insiders confirmed that behind closed doors, the mood was far more somber than what the public was allowed to see. Imagine the psychological impact of this for Prince William himself. Raised in the spotlight, expected to fulfill duties with unwavering composure, and constantly monitored by both family and media, facing personal health concerns must have been isolating. Those close to him described moments of frustration, quiet tension, and private struggles with the weight of expectation. Imagine carrying not just your personal concerns, but the symbolic burden of continuity for an institution centuries old. Every doctor's visit, every test result, every private consultation carries implications beyond health. It speaks to succession, public perception, and the delicate balance of family dynamics. By this time, palace aides had begun to make subtle adjustments. Engagement schedules were modified to reduce strain, confidential medical appointments became more frequent, and private conversations among senior staff became more urgent. Even so, leaks, as they inevitably do in high-profile environments, started to surface. While officially denied or dismissed as speculation, the whispers gained traction, fueled by subtle behavioral changes and selective appearances. The public may not have realized it, but the Prince of Wales was navigating a private storm even as he maintained a public image of composure. And then came the first incident that truly sent waves through the inner circle. During a routine walk between engagements, Prince William reportedly experienced an episode that left staff deeply concerned. No cameras captured it, no public announcement was made. But the incident was documented internally, and those present described a level of vulnerability they had never witnessed. Suddenly, the theory that this was mere fatigue or stress was no longer tenable. Something more serious was unfolding, something that demanded attention and careful management. It was at this juncture that Prince Charles became directly involved. Sources indicate that he intervened personally, coordinating with medical professionals, reviewing confidential reports, and ensuring that both privacy and care were prioritized. Meetings were held at unusual hours, decisions were made quickly, and the usual calm of the palace gave way to urgency and concern. Kate Middleton's involvement intensified as well, with a focus on supporting her husband while protecting the family from unnecessary exposure. Every detail mattered, from dietary changes to rest schedules, to the careful choreography of public appearances. But despite these efforts, the public would eventually start to notice cracks. Observers began to speculate, photos circulated showing subtle signs of strain, and reporters pressed for answers. The palace's usual control of the narrative was challenged, not through direct confrontation, but through the accumulation of small, seemingly insignificant details that collectively told a story the public could no longer ignore. Questions multiplied. What was the true nature of his condition? How long had it been developing? Why had the family kept it quiet? Each unanswered question amplified curiosity and concern. And just when it seemed like the story might stabilize, an unexpected development occurred. A confidential document, reportedly from within the palace medical team, was leaked. It didn't contain full details, but it was enough to confirm what insiders had long feared. Prince William's health was more serious than anyone outside the family realized. The leak ignited speculation, forced analysts to reconsider timelines, and added a new layer of urgency to an already tense situation. Suddenly, every public appearance, every official engagement, every media interaction was under scrutiny for signs that had once gone unnoticed. This was the first time the private struggle became a public narrative, albeit indirectly. The Prince of Wales was no longer just a figure of ceremonial duty. He was a man facing a very real challenge, one that carried personal, familial, and institutional implications. And the initial signs, those small but telling indicators that began this story, were now understood in a broader context, as the early markers of a developing crisis that would soon dominate headlines, discussions, and palace strategy alike. But what came next would escalate the situation beyond anything anyone had anticipated, turning whispers and subtle signs into a full-blown revelation. A confirmation from the Prince of Wales himself that validated fears and set the stage for an unfolding drama of health, secrecy, and family tension that would grip not only the United Kingdom, but the world. What does it really look like inside the walls of Kensington Palace when the heir to the throne faces uncertainty? Most of the world only sees grandeur, protocol, and carefully staged appearances. But behind those ornate doors, the atmosphere can shift from calm to tense in a matter of moments. It is here, away from public scrutiny, that the true weight of Prince William's situation first became apparent. and it was heavier than anyone outside could imagine. The first sign of alarm came not from a public misstep or a leaked report, but from the hushed conversations among senior palace staff. Longtime aides, those who had served generations of royals, began noticing subtle changes in the inner workings of daily routines. Meetings were extended, schedules were adjusted, and discussions about Prince William's health became more frequent and serious. Whispered concerns, once easily dismissed as routine precaution, began to carry a sense of urgency that even the most loyal staff could not ignore. The palace operates like a finely tuned machine, but suddenly, cracks began to appear in the system. Prince Charles, always methodical and strategic, immediately recognized the implications. He convened private briefings with the palace medical team, advisors, and select staff members. Each meeting was meticulously documented, and contingency plans were drawn up for scenarios no one wanted to imagine. Charles's concern was twofold: the personal well-being of his eldest son and the institutional stability of the monarchy. Every decision had to consider both, and the stakes could not have been higher. Discussions ranged from subtle adjustments to William's schedule to possible interventions that would never be revealed publicly. The balance between care and discretion was delicate, and even minor missteps could spark unwanted attention. Kate Middleton, ever composed yet deeply perceptive, played a central role in managing the crisis behind the scenes. Sources indicate that she became a stabilizing presence for both William and the palace staff, coordinating rest periods, dietary adjustments, and private consultations with health professionals. Her role extended beyond support. She acted as a liaison between the family and staff, ensuring that the prince could continue his duties while receiving the care he required. Emotional intelligence became as important as logistics, and her ability to read subtle cues in William's demeanor allowed for adjustments before minor issues became larger problems. The palace medical team itself was under immense pressure. They had to navigate the dual responsibility of maintaining confidentiality while providing accurate assessments. Every consultation was carefully scheduled to avoid public attention, yet staff members report moments of visible tension in private corridors, hurried discussions, confidential documents handled with extreme caution, and the constant awareness that any mistake could lead to public exposure. One aide described it as walking a tightrope over a crowd of reporters and the entire world watching. Even routine engagements were reevaluated. Every public appearance, from charity events to official ceremonies, became a calculated risk. The staff had to consider not only William's immediate health, but also how the public would perceive any sign of fatigue, discomfort, or inconsistency. Small gestures, a cough, a momentary hesitation, a less-than-perfect smile, could ignite speculation. Advisors debated whether to postpone certain engagements, how to manage media inquiries, and how to prepare for scenarios that might unfold unexpectedly. Each decision, no matter how minor, carried ripple effects far beyond the palace walls. Amid this, the psychological strain on Prince William was mounting. Royal sources describe him as increasingly introspective, aware of the scrutiny surrounding every move he made. While he continued to perform his duties publicly with composure, privately, he faced a profound sense of isolation. The tension of balancing personal health concerns with the expectations of family, staff, and the public created an emotional pressure cooker. Those closest to him observed moments of frustration, quiet anxiety, and the heavy weight of knowing that any visible weakness could spark rumors or criticism. One of the most striking aspects of the situation was the contradictions inherent in palace life. On one hand, there was a need to maintain appearances, project strength, and uphold tradition. On the other, there was the urgent, human necessity of addressing genuine health concerns. These opposing demands created a unique tension. Staff had to protect the prince's image while also ensuring his well-being. It was a delicate balance, and insiders report that it left even the most experienced aides navigating unprecedented challenges. Adding to the complexity were the whispers and rumors that inevitably spread despite the palace's best efforts. Social media analysts began scrutinizing every appearance, looking for signs that might indicate health issues. Casual observers noted perceived inconsistencies in posture or energy, fueling speculation that would eventually reach major news outlets. The palace's attempts to maintain discretion only heightened curiosity, creating a paradox. The more private they tried to be, the more attention the situation attracted. Family dynamics were also under strain. Conversations between Prince Charles and Prince William reportedly grew more intense, with the senior royal urging transparency and proactive health management while respecting his son's wishes for privacy. Kate's role became increasingly critical, mediating between her husband's personal concerns and the logistical demands of public life. The children, young and perceptive, were shielded as much as possible, though insiders suggest that even minor disruptions in routine caused noticeable stress. Every aspect of family life was now intertwined with the larger narrative of health, secrecy, and duty. The first internal alert that something serious was happening came from a routine medical consultation that revealed results the palace could not ignore. Staff describe a hushed urgency in the follow-up meetings, a recognition that private concerns were escalating toward a situation that required immediate attention. It was at this point that contingency planning intensified. Advisors developed multiple courses of action depending on the progression of the health concern, weighing the potential impact on public engagements, family responsibilities, and succession considerations. Despite the gravity of the situation, there were moments of subtle humor and humanity within the palace. Staff recall brief instances where William would laugh off concern, joking with aides to maintain morale and normalcy. These moments, however, were fleeting, serving as brief respites from the overarching tension. They were necessary, because living under constant observation while managing private health concerns can be psychologically exhausting, both for the prince and for those supporting him. The contradictions continued to mount. A prince expected to lead and perform flawlessly, whose public image had always conveyed vitality, was now navigating vulnerability in a way the public had never seen. Advisors faced the impossible task of shielding him from unnecessary attention while preparing for scenarios where health developments might become impossible to conceal. Each decision had to consider optics, emotional impact, and practical realities. The palace became a stage of silent strategy, tension, and vigilance. And then, as if to underscore the precariousness of the situation, an unexpected leak surfaced. It was subtle at first. A photograph that suggested fatigue, a minor delay at an event, a comment overheard by an observant journalist. Though the palace officially denied any health concerns, insiders knew the leak validated what they had long feared. The private worries that had dominated internal discussions were now seeping into the public narrative. The tension inside the palace intensified. Advisors convened emergency meetings, family discussions grew more urgent, and every decision carried amplified significance. Even with all precautions, Prince William was aware that the walls of discretion were fragile. He reportedly began to consider how to manage public perception while prioritizing his health. The dual responsibility of personal well-being and public expectation weighed heavily, and those close to him describe a careful negotiation between maintaining appearances and acknowledging reality. Every move became strategic, every interaction carefully measured, and every conversation with medical staff and family became critical. The situation was no longer hypothetical. It had moved from subtle signs to tangible concerns, from whispers to documentation, from speculation to strategic action. The palace's inner circle was navigating a reality that few outsiders could truly comprehend. A future monarch facing a private struggle, under the watchful eye of the world, with every decision carrying consequences for family, institution, and legacy. But just when it seemed the palace had contained the internal worry, an even more alarming revelation emerged. A confidential report, shared only among the highest-ranking advisors and the prince's closest medical team, indicated that the health concern was progressing faster than anticipated. The potential implications were staggering, and the document was treated with utmost secrecy. Those who saw it describe a palpable shift in the mood of the palace. Tension that had simmered beneath the surface now boiled to the forefront. And this is where the story takes a new turn. Where private anxiety, institutional responsibility, and emerging public scrutiny intersect in a way that threatens to redefine everything about Prince William's current life and future role. What happens next will shock even the most seasoned royal observers. Because the prince's personal struggle is no longer just an internal matter. It is on the verge of becoming a global story. Have you ever wondered how much of what you see is real? How much is carefully curated, rehearsed, and designed to protect someone's image? Nowhere is this tension more evident than in the life of Prince William, where the line between public perception and private reality is razor-thin, and where the stakes of maintaining that line could not be higher. What the world sees, the confident, composed air, the smiling prince engaging with crowds, attending royal events, and performing ceremonial duties, is only a fraction of the full picture. Behind the cameras, away from the flashbulbs, a far more complex and far more human story unfolds. The first cracks in the facade were subtle. Observers, trained to notice minute details, began to detect inconsistencies in William's energy and demeanor. A slight pause before speaking, a fleeting grimace when moving, a hand lingering longer on a support rail, small gestures that would have gone unnoticed by most, began to tell a story. For those closest to him, these were unmistakable signals. The man who had been portrayed as unflappable was quietly contending with physical and emotional challenges that demanded attention. The prince's staff, ever vigilant, began to make subtle adjustments to his schedule, rearranging engagements, and providing discreet support to mitigate fatigue. Consider a typical day for Prince William. It might begin with a military exercise or public appearance, followed by a series of meetings and charity engagements. Each interaction is designed not only to fulfill duty, but to project strength and continuity. The public sees smiling faces, a perfectly executed handshake, and a polished speech. But in private, the pressures are immense. Every conversation, every handshake, every subtle gesture is filtered through the lens of expectation. Any deviation risks not only speculation, but potential criticism. The balance between performing royal duty and managing private health becomes an intricate dance, and it is one that William has had to master while confronting real, personal challenges. The strain extends beyond the physical. Emotional pressure, isolation, and the need to maintain composure at all times can be draining. Sources describe moments where William retreated into private spaces, needing solitude to process both his responsibilities and his health concerns. He could not share his fears publicly. Any sign of weakness could ripple through the monarchy, staff, media, and public. Family dynamics also added complexity. Prince Charles, Kate Middleton, and the children all became stakeholders in this delicate balancing act, each aware that the prince's well-being affected not just him, but the entire royal institution. The contradictions in palace life are stark. On one hand, the world demands visibility and transparency. On the other, the family and staff must guard against revealing vulnerabilities. Every public appearance is choreographed, every speech measured. But behind the scenes, reality diverges. Meetings with doctors, private consultations, and subtle health interventions occur away from the cameras. Staff describe a constant undercurrent of tension, where minor incidents are scrutinized internally to ensure that they do not become public fodder. The palace is a theater in which both performance and discretion are simultaneously required. Even the media, powerful as it is, often captures only fragments of the truth. Photos of William jogging, smiling, or greeting crowds may convey vitality, but they rarely reveal the effort it takes to maintain appearances. Journalists notice patterns, subtle hesitations, or signs of fatigue, and speculation begins. Social media amplifies these observations, dissecting body language, facial expressions, and public statements. Yet, even with these inferences, the public only glimpses a curated reality. The true private struggle remains largely unseen, managed carefully within the palace walls and by those closest to him. Perhaps most striking are the emotional contradictions. William's desire to serve, to maintain his role, and to uphold tradition often conflicts with the personal need to address health challenges and protect his well-being. Staff members recount moments of tension where the prince would insist on fulfilling duties despite visible strain, prioritizing public perception over private needs. Kate Middleton's role became increasingly critical during these times. She had to negotiate between public duty and private care, ensuring that William could continue his work while safeguarding his health. Her involvement was not just supportive but strategic, orchestrating schedules, rest periods, and private consultations to reduce the risk of overexertion. Yet, even within this controlled environment, contradictions emerge. A canceled engagement may signal health concerns, but it can also invite scrutiny or fuel rumors. Adjustments in daily routines must be balanced against appearances of normalcy, creating a high-stakes environment in which every decision carries multiple layers of consequence. The staff operate under immense pressure, navigating secrecy, public expectation, and the unpredictable nature of both health and media. Each day becomes a careful negotiation of visibility, reality, and control. One particularly revealing incident involved a routine public appearance at a charitable event. William arrived on schedule, greeting attendees with his trademark composure. Observers noted his posture seemed slightly altered, movements slightly slower than usual. A photographer captured a fleeting moment in which his expression betrayed a hint of fatigue, a detail invisible to the casual onlooker but scrutinized heavily by the palace team. Within minutes, aides and advisors were adjusting schedules, noting that additional rest would be required, and preparing for contingencies. This was not an isolated incident, but part of an emerging pattern that highlighted the tension between public perception and private reality. Emotional stakes were high. The prince himself understood that the public and family perception was as critical as the physical reality. One misstep could ignite media speculation, undermine public confidence, and add stress to already delicate family dynamics. Sources report that William often reflects on the irony of his position. Appearing strong, composed, and invulnerable while contending with personal challenges that few outside the inner circle could fully understand. This duality, public strength versus private vulnerability, underscores much of the tension in palace life during this period. The contradictions extended to family interactions. Prince Charles reportedly urged transparency and proactive health management, while William navigated his own sense of responsibility, privacy, and duty. Kate's mediation became essential, balancing her husband's needs with family stability and institutional continuity. Staff members describe a dynamic in which every conversation and decision carried emotional weight, logistical complexity, and strategic significance. Even seemingly minor choices, adjusting an engagement, modifying a speech, or managing a photo opportunity, had far-reaching consequences for perception and planning. And yet, despite the controlled environment, the world outside the palace walls remained unpredictable. Rumors began circulating on social media, fueled by subtle inconsistencies and speculative commentary. Observers debated the prince's health, appearances, and possible diagnoses. The palace's attempts to maintain discretion only heightened curiosity, creating a paradox in which privacy efforts inadvertently amplified public attention. The tension between what the public saw and what was occurring behind closed doors intensified with every appearance, every statement, every subtle gesture. The emotional dimension was equally profound. William faced isolation, knowing that even family and aides could not fully alleviate the pressure of expectation. The constant need for composure, coupled with the awareness of his health concerns, created a psychological strain few could imagine. Staff report moments of quiet reflection, brief retreats into private spaces, and the ongoing challenge of managing personal well-being while maintaining public performance. Each day was a delicate negotiation between strength and vulnerability, duty and care, perception and reality. Then, just when the private management of these issues seemed to stabilize, a subtle but consequential leak surfaced. A photograph circulated online showing William pausing during a public walk, his expression momentarily tense. While officially downplayed, insiders recognized it as evidence that private realities were beginning to intersect with public perception. The palace's controlled narrative was under threat, and advisors convened emergency meetings to reassess strategies for balancing health, privacy, and appearances. The dual reality, public facade versus private struggle, had become increasingly difficult to maintain. And now, as these tensions mounted, a new element emerged, an unprecedented insight from someone inside the inner circle. This insider observation hinted not only at the nature of the health concerns, but at how the palace was managing them, revealing both the extraordinary lengths taken to preserve appearances and the unavoidable strain that these efforts imposed on everyone involved. The public might see the prince standing tall, smiling, performing his duties, but the truth was far more nuanced, complex, and human than any image could convey. But just when it seemed the palace could continue controlling the narrative, a new twist was set to change everything. Details that had been carefully shielded were poised to emerge, threatening to blur the line between public perception and private reality in ways no one had anticipated. A revelation that would not only shock royal observers, but redefine what the world thought it knew about Prince William and his current struggles. What happens when whispers of concern become undeniable proof? When private fears, long confined to palace walls, suddenly spill into documents that the world can scrutinize. That's the moment everything changed for Prince William. The first subtle hints of fatigue, the minor adjustments to schedules, the carefully orchestrated public appearances, all of it led to a pivotal moment that would confirm what insiders had feared for months. The prince's health was under serious strain, and the private world of Kensington Palace was about to collide with public attention in a way no one had anticipated. The leak began quietly, almost imperceptibly. A set of medical documents, intended for the eyes of a handful of advisors and doctors, somehow found their way into the hands of an anonymous source. The contents were heavily redacted in the initial release, but even partial information was enough to send shockwaves through royal circles. Observers noted that the documents confirmed early suspicions. Prince William had been undergoing a series of tests, consultations, and treatments that were not routine. The leaks validated internal concerns, shifting speculation from rumor to near certainty. Inside the palace, reactions were immediate and tense. Senior aides convened emergency meetings to assess the situation and determine the potential fallout. Prince Charles reportedly reviewed the documents himself, focusing on both the health implications and the broader impact on the monarchy. Kate Middleton, aware of the sensitivity and personal nature of the information, coordinated with staff to ensure that William's public appearances could continue without exacerbating the situation. The delicate balance of transparency, discretion, and protection of the prince's well-being became more critical than ever. The documents themselves were telling. While medical jargon obscured full understanding for the casual reader, insiders recognized alarming trends. There were references to conditions that could impact energy levels, physical stamina, and long-term health. Observations noted in the reports suggested that even routine engagements might pose challenges. The potential implications for the prince's ability to perform duties, attend ceremonial events, and maintain public composure were carefully considered by both medical professionals and palace advisors. Every detail in the report carried weight, and every decision about how to manage the information became a matter of urgency. The leak also intensified media scrutiny. Within hours, headlines speculated on the nature of the health concerns. Social media erupted with analysis, commentary, and conjecture. Journalists and analysts began piecing together clues from public appearances, previous events, and insider commentary to construct a narrative that was only partially accurate but wholly compelling. The palace, traditionally adept at managing public perception, suddenly faced the challenge of controlling both the story and its implications for the prince's personal privacy. Adding to the tension was the human factor. Prince William, already aware of the subtle signs his staff had observed, now had to contend with the knowledge that the world might soon examine intimate details of his health. The psychological strain of performing under scrutiny, combined with genuine concern for personal well-being, created a complex emotional landscape. Staff members noted that the prince remained composed in public, but private moments revealed the weight of responsibility and the personal anxiety he carried. Every decision, from daily schedules to long-term health management, had to account for both perception and reality. Within the palace, protocols were immediately revised. Medical teams prepared contingency plans for both expected and unexpected developments. Staff were briefed on how to respond to potential media inquiries, manage public appearances, and support the prince emotionally. Kate Middleton's role became increasingly central, balancing logistical concerns with personal support. The family navigated an environment where even minor missteps could generate outsized consequences, and where the overlap of private health and public expectation demanded constant vigilance. The leak also exposed underlying tensions among palace staff and advisors. Questions arose. How had the documents been accessed? Was this a deliberate attempt to force transparency or an accidental breach? Investigations reportedly began, not only to trace the leak, but to anticipate and mitigate further exposure. The breach highlighted the fragility of control within the palace, revealing that even the most carefully guarded secrets were vulnerable to scrutiny. The dynamic of trust, discretion, and internal coordination became central to managing the crisis. For the public, the leaked information represented a turning point. Whereas previous speculation had been based largely on observation and conjecture, the documents provided tangible evidence that something significant was occurring. Observers began analyzing photographs, videos, and reports in light of the newly revealed information. Discussions online ranged from expressions of concern and empathy to intense debate over the monarchy's transparency and the prince's ability to fulfill his role. The leak effectively shifted the story from rumor to reality, demanding response and explanation from those closest to the situation. The psychological toll on Prince William intensified as a result. Living under constant observation is one challenge, but having intimate health details exposed, even partially, introduces an entirely new level of stress. Sources indicate that he relied heavily on Kate, his inner circle, and select advisors to navigate these turbulent waters. Every conversation, every decision, and every engagement became an exercise in strategy, emotional resilience, and careful planning. Even routine interactions required consideration of how information might be perceived or misinterpreted by the public. Amidst this, the palace attempted damage control. Official statements were carefully worded, emphasizing general well-being and routine health checks while avoiding specifics. Yet, even these carefully crafted messages could not fully counteract the momentum of the leaked documents. The public's curiosity had been ignited, speculation intensified, and scrutiny became relentless. Every event, speech, and photograph was now interpreted through the lens of the leak, amplifying tension and pressure on both the prince and his team. Complicating matters further were contradictions within the reports themselves. Certain sections suggested ongoing health management, emphasizing preventive care and routine interventions. Other parts hinted at progressive concerns that required monitoring and potentially more intensive measures. The combination of reassuring language and alarming implications created confusion, both internally and externally. Staff, advisors, and family members had to navigate this ambiguity carefully, balancing optimism with caution while ensuring that the prince's privacy and dignity remained intact. Emotional beats played a crucial role in this period. Prince William reportedly experienced moments of quiet reflection, frustration, and concern. While outward appearances remained composed, private observations suggested the weight of expectation, responsibility, and vulnerability. Kate's support, the coordination of staff, and the guidance of medical professionals formed a protective network, though even the most effective strategies could not fully alleviate the psychological strain. Every day became a negotiation between managing health, public duties, and emotional well-being. As the leak circulated further, the palace recognized that proactive measures were necessary. Internal communication protocols were tightened, engagement schedules were reassessed, and contingency plans were reviewed. Advisors began considering how future disclosures might be managed, how public perception could be guided, and how the prince's personal and professional responsibilities could be balanced amid ongoing scrutiny. Each step required careful calculation, recognizing that transparency, privacy, and duty were often in tension with one another. And then came the most shocking revelation contained within the leaked documents. Indications that Prince William's health concern was not static but progressing. The details were subtle, almost coded in medical terminology, but to those who understood the implications, the message was clear: the situation was escalating. What had begun as subtle signs, small adjustments, and careful monitoring was now entering a phase that demanded heightened vigilance, strategic foresight, and emotional resilience. The palace, staff, and family were forced to confront a reality they had long anticipated but hoped would not arrive so suddenly. The leak had accelerated the timeline, bringing private concerns into public consciousness and forcing immediate action. Every decision, from daily routines to long-term planning, now carried intensified significance. The balance between health, duty, and perception was no longer theoretical. It was immediate, urgent, and consequential. But just when it seemed the palace had regained control over the narrative, another element emerged. A confidential insight from an insider that hinted at an even deeper concern, one that could redefine not only the public's understanding of Prince William's health, but the strategies the palace would employ moving forward. The story was far from over, and what came next would shift the perception of the monarchy in ways that few could have predicted. What happens when private health concerns intersect with family expectations, duty, and unspoken resentments? That question defines the next chapter of Prince William's story. Behind the gilded doors of Kensington Palace, tensions that had been simmering beneath the surface began to boil over, creating emotional friction, difficult conversations, and moments of raw vulnerability that few outside could have anticipated. While the public sees unity and composure, the private reality is far more complex, a tangled web of worry, responsibility, and conflicting priorities. The first signs of heightened tension were subtle but unmistakable to those inside the inner circle. Family dinners, usually composed and predictable, became sites of careful negotiation. Discussions that might have once focused on schedules, charity engagements, or minor household matters now carried layers of urgency and emotional weight. Prince Charles, always strategic and forward-thinking, reportedly found himself torn between supporting his eldest son's well-being and managing the broader implications for the monarchy. Every conversation had subtext. Every word carried significance far beyond its immediate context. Kate Middleton's role became even more critical during this period. Observers from within the palace describe her as a stabilizing force, balancing emotional support with practical coordination. She was mediating between William's personal concerns and the family's broader responsibilities, ensuring that his health and well-being were prioritized without disrupting public duties. Yet even with her guidance, tension was inevitable. The prince's parents, advisors, and siblings all had vested interests in the outcome, creating a delicate ecosystem where emotional reactions could escalate quickly if not managed carefully. One particularly tense episode reportedly occurred during a private family discussion regarding upcoming public engagements. Prince Charles expressed concern that certain appearances might be too physically taxing for William, while the prince himself insisted on maintaining the schedule, driven by a sense of duty and responsibility. The conversation, which began calmly, escalated as differing priorities clashed. Kate, as mediator, worked to de-escalate the situation, reminding both men of the importance of balancing public perception with personal health. Sources describe the moment as emotionally charged, with subtle signs of frustration, worry, and strain visible on every face. The emotional stakes were further heightened by the presence of the younger generation. Prince George and Princess Charlotte, though shielded as much as possible, were acutely aware of tension between their parents. Observers note that William and Kate took extra care to maintain normalcy for the children, but even minor disruptions in routine or visible parental stress could ripple outward, creating subtle stressors for the entire family. Balancing the children's well-being with ongoing public duties added another layer of complexity to an already tense environment. Confidential conversations within the palace revealed another source of tension, differing approaches to transparency and disclosure. Prince Charles reportedly advocated for proactive management of both health and public messaging, suggesting that clarity could reduce speculation and anxiety. William, however, preferred discretion, concerned that overexposure might compromise privacy, family dignity, and his own sense of autonomy. Kate again played a mediating role, helping both men navigate this delicate balance while ensuring that the prince's needs were respected. Even staff members felt the pressure. Longtime aides described the palace atmosphere as taut, with every decision scrutinized not only for its immediate impact, but for potential consequences in a complex web of family dynamics. Adjustments to schedules, private consultations, and informal interventions became constant. Every move had to account for both emotional well-being and practical necessity, and missteps, even minor ones, risked escalating tension further. Complicating matters were lingering questions about how public perception would intersect with private reality. Media attention, fueled by leaks and speculation, added a new layer of stress. Advisors worried that any visible sign of strain could become fodder for headlines, while family members struggled with the knowledge that their personal struggles might be interpreted through the lens of public expectation and scrutiny. The dual responsibility of managing internal family dynamics and external perception created an environment of almost relentless pressure. As the situation progressed, family tensions escalated beyond subtle disagreements to moments of outright confrontation. Reports suggest that in one high-stakes meeting, William expressed frustration over the constant intrusion into his personal life, including the pressure to maintain appearances despite his health concerns. Charles, while sympathetic, emphasized the broader responsibilities of the monarchy and the expectations of the public. Kate attempted to mediate, but even her calming presence could not entirely neutralize the underlying emotional currents. Staff later described the meeting as a turning point, where the private struggle became intertwined with broader questions of duty, expectation, and family hierarchy. Meanwhile, rumors about the family's internal disagreements began circulating outside palace walls, adding another layer of complexity. Social media and tabloids picked up subtle cues, the way William appeared in public, the timing of engagements, and even brief statements from insiders, interpreting them as signs of tension. While much of the speculation was exaggerated, it nonetheless increased the pressure on the family, forcing careful consideration of both private health management and public messaging. The emotional impact on William was profound. Those close to him reported moments of visible frustration, isolation, and vulnerability. He faced the dual challenge of managing his own health while navigating the expectations of parents, siblings, and staff. The burden of balancing duty, family loyalty, and personal well-being created intense internal pressure, often compounded by the need to maintain composure in public settings. Moments of conflict, even when resolved, left lingering effects that shaped the family's daily interactions and overall emotional climate. Adding to the tension were discussions about potential long-term consequences. Advisors and family members debated the implications of William's condition on succession planning, public appearances, and even the future of certain royal duties. These conversations, often conducted in private, were complex and emotionally charged, requiring a balance between strategic foresight and immediate support for the prince's well-being. The stakes were enormous, and every decision carried both practical and emotional weight. Even within this tense environment, moments of humanity emerged. William reportedly showed gratitude toward Kate, acknowledging her role in stabilizing both family dynamics and public obligations. Staff observed brief exchanges of levity or reassurance, small gestures that provided temporary relief from the pressure cooker environment of the palace. Yet these moments were fleeting, constantly overshadowed by the persistent challenges of balancing health, duty, and family expectation. And then, as the tension reached a peak, an unexpected development occurred, a private confrontation that revealed a deeper fracture in the family dynamic. One member, frustrated by perceived secrecy or lack of information, challenged the approach being taken to manage William's health. The exchange, though conducted behind closed doors, had emotional reverberations that extended throughout the palace. Advisors scrambled to mediate, Kate intervened to calm emotions, and William himself was forced to navigate conflicting perspectives while maintaining composure. The result was clear. Family tensions were no longer a background concern, but a central element of the unfolding narrative. The private management of William's health, already complicated by media scrutiny and institutional responsibility, now had to contend with emotional friction that threatened to destabilize carefully maintained routines. Every engagement, conversation, and decision became a negotiation of emotional stakes, practical necessity, and strategic consideration. But just when it seemed the family had reached a fragile equilibrium, an entirely new factor emerged. A revelation that would challenge not only their private dynamics, but the public perception of Prince William's condition. A piece of information, previously kept within the inner circle, surfaced in a way that forced immediate attention. What happened next would not only escalate tension, but set the stage for a dramatic shift in how the prince's struggles were understood, both inside the palace and by the world at large.